We're going to go through these 5 topics so that you can understand what statistics is all about. We're not going to do any math, we're not going to do any computations, but instead let's focus on that big picture, starting with data and variables. Now we can break up data and variables into 2 different types, and that's qualitative and quantitative. We're going to ask a group of college students a couple of questions for examples of both of these types. With qualitative, I want you to think quality. So that would be like one of their hair colors, maybe their name. These are also known as categorical variables. Quantitative, I want you to think quantity. These are numerical, maybe the number of credits that they're taking, how tall they are, things like that. Now, for the most part, our qualitative variables can be divided into 2 subcategories, and those are nominal and ordinal. Nominal is something that we're just identifying, but there's no ranking or order, and ordinal is something where there is a ranking. So for example, clothing size, small, medium, and large, those are definitely not numbers, but they definitely have an order to them. We can divide those quantitative variables up into either discrete or continuous. Discrete variables typically count, and they give us only certain numbers, usually whole numbers, and continuous numbers can give us anything including decimal points. Now, we could have asked the entire student body these questions. That entire student body would be our population, but instead we're going to work on a smaller group, and that is our sample. Let's dive in with some qualitative variables with these 2 questions. The first one is, what is your major? And the second one is, what class are you in? For major, they might answer something like psychology or communications or engineering, but there's no order to these majors. So we would say that those are nominal. For what class, what year are you? They would say something like freshman or senior or sophomore or junior. There is definitely an order to those, so class would fall under ordinal. Now let's get to some quantitative variables with these 2 questions. We want to know how many roommates they have, and we also want to know what is their GPA. So for roommates, they're going to have like 1 or 2 or 5 roommates, but they're not going to have like half of a roommate. So those values count and can only take on whole numbers. Those are discrete. So number of roommates goes there. And for what is your GPA, it could be anything from like a 3.0 to a 2.897. It can take on lots of decimal places, so GPA goes under continuous. Okay, how are we doing? We've got a few more topics to cover. Statistical measures are next. Statistical measures allow us to answer questions about an entire group. For example, how old is this group of students? So we want to know what this age is. Is this going to be a qualitative or a quantitative variable? If you said quantitative for quantity, you are correct. So let's say that we asked everybody in this group and we came up with this data set. There happens to be 10 values in this data set. We call that n. So the size of that data set, n in this case, is 10. We can also look at the mean of our data. In statistics, we use mean, but it's really what we typically think of as an average. So I added up all of those ages, I divided by 10, and I came up with an average of, or a mean of 19.2. Notice that I'm using x with a line on top of it. That is x bar. We can use x bar to denote the mean. This is a very generic way to denote the mean. Or we can be a little more specific and use either mu, which is that Greek letter that you see first, or the English letter m. If we use that Greek letter mu, we are saying that this is the mean for an entire population. If instead we use the English letter m, we are saying that this is a mean specifically for a sample. Generally in statistics, Greek letters describe a population measure and English letters describe a sample measure. But we can also talk about how spread out our data is, starting with the range. The range is the maximum minus the minimum. In this case, 22 minus 17, and we've got a range of 5. We can also look at the standard deviation as a measure of spread. Standard means common, deviation means how far away. So this is how far away a typical value is from the mean. In our case, the mean was 19.2. And as you look at those ages, it looks like most of them are somewhere between 1 and 2 years away from 19.2. We can compute these using either of these formulas. We're not going to do that. I did the work for you, and we came up with S as the sample standard deviation, 1.549. But if this data happens to be all of our population data, we would use sigma, and that sigma is 1.4697. What I really want you to remember out of this example is that that sample standard deviation has this little adjustment factor that makes it slightly larger. When we're looking at a sample of data, it's pretty likely that we're going to miss some of the extreme values, like our oldest student or maybe our youngest student. Okay, how are we doing? Next up are probability distributions. Let's start with one that you know. What's the probability of getting tails in a coin toss? Well, if you said 50-50, you are correct. There's a 50% chance that you get heads, 50% chance that you get tails. Of course, these are all the outcomes, so they add up to 100%. But look down at the bottom. At the bottom, we've got numbers 0 and 1. So this is actually counting the number of tails. So we're going to let X count the number of tails. This is going to allow us to toss even more coins. And that means that heads, X would be 0, 0 tails, and tails, X would be 1 for 1 tail. Okay, next, we're going to flip 4 coins. How many tails do you expect to get? If you said 2, you are absolutely correct. We call this our expected value. Notice that letter mu shows up again. So mu is our expected value. If I were to add up all of these probabilities here, we end up with 100%. Now let's say that you're flipping 20 coins. How many tails do you expect to get? If you said 10, you are absolutely correct. 10 is that expected value. And again, the sum of those probabilities is 100%. You'll notice that this is starting to look like a bell-shaped curve. And the bell-shaped curve has the same properties that we're seeing here with this probability distribution. The bell-shaped curve has a total area underneath of 100%. Imagine now that we're flipping like 10,000 coins. In the middle, we've got most of our results. That would be 68%. That happens to be within 1 standard deviation where most of our results live. The next group is 95% of our area. That's within 2 standard deviations. And then we've got within 3 standard deviations. We say that this is a normal curve with these properties. Our area is 100%. The mean is right there in the middle, along with the median, which is the middlemost, and the mode, which is the most frequent, and our curve is symmetric. This distribution is a foundation for many of the things that we do in statistics. Okay, along our journey here, we are ready now for confidence intervals. With a confidence interval, we want to answer a question like this. What is the average age of the students at our school? Well, it's impossible to interview every single student, plus some are dropping out or joining. So instead, we're going to do this with a sample. In our sample, we've got 33 students, and we found an average age of 19.8. We could definitely use 19.8 to approximate mu, the average age for our population, but there were several samples that we could have taken with varying average ages. So instead, what we want to do is to construct an interval that contains 95% of those sample averages. This is what we call our confidence interval. And with this interval, we can say with 95% confidence that the actual average age for everybody in the school is between 17.1 and 21.7. Next up, we've got hypothesis testing. We're going to be able to answer a question like this. Let's say that our class's average turned out to be 28.3, but the school said that the average age of all students was 19.8. It really seems that our mean of 28.3, our sample mean, is significantly higher than what the school said of 19.8. That would be our population mean. But this is a lot like our judicial system. We're going to assume innocent until proven guilty. So we're going to assume that the schools is correct with our null hypothesis. So this null hypothesis, H sub 0, says that the school is right and that population mean is 19.8. But what we're really trying to prove is our alternative hypothesis, H sub A, and this one says that mu is significantly greater than 19.8. So how do we decide that 28.3, it's definitely higher, but how do we know that it's significantly higher? We need a significance level, and we're going to go ahead and set the significance level at 0.05. We call that alpha, and this tells us that in order for 28.3 to be significantly high, it's going to live in the top 5%. Remember, the area underneath that entire curve was 100%, so we need 28.3 to live in that top 5%. Now let's say it does. So we would need to compute this based on the size of our sample and the standard deviation, but we're just going to say that it does land there. And if that's true, that means it is significantly higher, and we can reject that null hypothesis that said it actually was 19.8. This leaves us with this conclusion. We're going to support the claim that the average age of students is significantly higher. But what if it didn't land in that top 5%? Remember, we needed it to be in the top 5% to be significantly higher than. It isn't, so we are not going to reject. And as statisticians, we say that we fail to reject that null hypothesis. Our conclusion here is that we do not support the claim, or we could say that we don't have enough evidence. A really great way to do hypothesis testing is with p-values. Now this is going to be the same scenario. Notice that I've got that null hypothesis of the mean being 19.8. To be significantly high, we need that sample mean to be in the top 5%. But this time for our sample mean, we're given this p-value of 0.324. This p-value is a percentage that says that 28.3 is in the top 32.4%. But that isn't good enough. We needed it to be in the top 5%. So because it's only in the top 32.4%, we're going to fail to reject that mu was 19.8. We never say that we accept because maybe we just need to go and collect more data, but we fail to reject. Let's instead say that that p-value is 0.021. Notice how it's now smaller than that significance level. This tells me that my sample mean is in the top 2.1%. It only needed to be in the top 5% to be significant, so we are definitely significantly higher, and we can reject that null hypothesis. There's so much more to learn when it comes to statistics. I've got you covered.